Snow drifted through the broken battlements of Winterfell, falling in hushed spirals that caught the pale gleam of lantern light. The castle breathed again after years of Boltons and Greyjoys. Yet every stone still remembered screams. In the Godswood, the heart tree bled crimson under its crust of ice, and somewhere in the quiet halls a direwolf pup padded, sniffing the blood scent that would never wholly fade. Sansa Stark felt it all with a keening awareness that chafed her skin like frostbite. She stood at her window in the bedchamber once kept for honored guests, fingers clasped behind her back, watching men-at-arms of House Arryn drill in the courtyard below. Their pale blue cloaks whipped and snapped like gulls in a gale, bright against the sooty stone. Outsiders among northerners clad in fur and boiled leather. Vale steel flashed, northern axes glinted, and the clash of cultures rang louder than their blades. Beside her, a soft intake of breath announced Petyr Baelish's presence. Littlefinger moved quietly even in mailed boots, the clink of his silver mockingbird pin, the only herald of his approach. "They look well together, don't you think?" he murmured, voice dipped in honey. "Falcon and direwolf. One fights with speed, the other with ferocity. Combined, an enemy finds little ground to stand upon." Sansa did not turn. She had learned that silence discomfited him more than negation. She let the hush linger until she heard him shift, cloak rustling. Only then did she answer, carefully neutral. "They train, yet they glare at one another in the gaps, unsure whom they serve." "Oh, but that is the simplest of questions." Pale green eyes glinted in the watery light. "They serve the future. And the future," he said, stepping until his breath stirred the loose strands about her ear, "belongs to those bold enough to seize it." Wind moaned through the cracked shutters. Sansa felt Littlefinger's nearness like a prong of heated iron. In the courtyard, two men overreached at once, steel meeting steel with a shriek that echoed her thoughts, and tumbled into the slush, wrestling. The others fell back, shouting, anger blooming where discipline should have lived. Direwolf or Falcon? They had not yet chosen a single banner. "Wars are won before blades ever kiss," Littlefinger continued. Voice silk. A word whispered, a vow exchanged, a door left open at the right moment. That is where victory lies. His gloved hand settled on her arm, light as snow. "You know this. You've lived it. Now." Old memories flared. King's Landing. The sound of bells and cheers as Joffrey smiled beneath a sky as bright as a sword point. Later, the rasp of rope about her wrists, the stench of Ramsay's kennels. She swallowed. "I know betrayal. And I know opportunity." He gestured to the yard. "The north bleeds, Sansa.I. The Vale waits. Marry me, and together we bind them. Steel to ice. The lords will acclaim you, for you are Eddard's daughter, and they will accept me, for I bring the knights of the Vale and coffers deeper than Winterfell's frozen crypts." His thumb traced lazy circles upon her sleeve. "A crown forged of necessity sits lighter than one hammered of pride." Sansa turned then, meeting him eye to eye. Petyr had trimmed his beard shorter after the snows, streaks of silver catching torch glow. He smelled faintly of cloves and parchment. She recalled the words her heart whispered on long, lonely nights. "If I am to survive, I must learn to play their games, better than they." And yet, as she stared into the fox-keen gaze of the man who had sold her more times than she could count, she wondered whether survival alone was victory. "What of Jon?" she asked softly. "He is still king in the north to many." A shadow flickered across Littlefinger's smile. "Jon Snow is a bastard made Lord Commander by chance and crowned king by desperation. He means well, but he has the vision of a blacksmith. Loyal, blunt, and unable to see past the next swing of his hammer. Already he answers a summons from Dragonstone, chasing tales of southern dragons while his own people shiver." Petyr's fingers tightened. "The North cannot wait upon fables. It needs a strong hand. Your hand. I will lend mine to steady it." No, Sansa thought. He will guide my hand until it serves only his will. Yet even as the warning hissed, she felt another voice whisper, "Use him as he would use you." Petyr Baelish had shown her how power was woven. A marriage could bind the Vale, the North, and the Riverlands. By rights of blood he carefully enumerated each night, before the fire. And who else would the Northern lords accept if Jon failed to return, or bent the knee to the Dragon Queen as rumor claimed? A Stark they might follow. A Stark with a powerful husband. They could not refuse. Sansa drew a breath that tasted of iron brazier smoke. If I consent, it will be on my terms. Littlefinger inclined his head. Naturally. I will be queen in the North in truth, not ornament. Our children will bear the name Stark, not Baelish. And the North will remain its own, owing fealty to no southern throne. Then see. He smiled. Slow and satisfied, as though she had agreed already. As you say, a rose by any other name still perfumes the air. My words are not roses, Sansa said coldly. They are stone. Break them, and you will find them lodged in your throat. For an instant, something primal sparked in his eyes, respect or hunger, she could not tell. He bowed. Winterfell shall prepare for a wedding. The ravens flew, black blotches against pewter skies. Seals were cracked by men whose grandfathers had died for Robb Stark, whose fathers had bent knee to Ramsay Bolton, and whose own sons now dug graves for corpses half frozen in the driftwood vale. The scroll bore Sansa's signature and Littlefinger's red wax mockingbird beside the direwolf. It named her queen in the North, and him her prince consort, pledged his fortunes to northern needs, reaffirmed ancient rights, and summoned each lord to Winterfell to witness the vows beneath Hearttree and new carved weirwood crown. In Deepwood Motte, Lady Asha Greyjoy laughed at the audacity, and slid the parchment across the map table to her uncle Aeron. A pink-cheeked crow seeks to mate the wolf, she said, though in private she admired Sansa's courage. In Bear Island, young Lyanna Mormont slammed her fist and called it treason until Master Corbin coaxed her from the cold, reminding that the North bled and must not fracture again. In White Harbor, the Merling King's bells tolled, while Lord Wyman fingered his triple chins, pondering grain shipments and taxes due. And far to the south, in the library of Old Town, Samwell Tarly held the Raven's cousin, Jon's letter begging men of learning to search for answers in dusty scrolls, and wondered whether the North itself was coming alive, like some great beast turning in its troubled sleep. The first of the lords arrived through swirling snow. House Glover with banners of the Silver Fist, House Manderley with bright green trident fish, handfuls of Umbers, Ryswells, Littles, and Kirks. Vale Knights lined the walls, saluting each arrival with stilted courtesy. Rumors spread like brushfire starved of air. Jon Snow rode south, the Dragon Queen sailed north, and Sansa Stark would wed the Mockingbird. In every smoky hall the question hissed, would we kneel or fight? But no one dared voice it in the great hall, where Sansa sat upon the carved oaken seat once hewn for her father. White fur mantle flowing, face serene as deep water. Littlefinger stood at her right, draped in sable and gray, circlet of moon steel glimmering above his brow. He looked every inch the prince consort he named himself, though muttered japes that his crown weighed lighter than a pin upon his cloak. Yet when he spoke, his words dripped gold. He promised new grain silos, smithies stocked with southern coal, coin for widows of the bastards' war, alliances sealed by mutual trade. He spoke of roads cleared by Vale engineers and port fees halved in White Harbor, if Lord Wyman bound his fleet to northern cause. And always he circled back to the Hearttree wedding, a union sanctified by old gods and new. Proof that the North's wounds would close, not fester. Sansa said little, but her eyes roamed the assembly like the winter wolf seeking scent. She smiled at Lady Mormont. Brisk nod. She dipped her head to Lord Manderley, slower, patient. When a drunken Umber roared that only a Stark of true-born line should wear a crown, she rose with measured grace. I am that Stark, she said, voice ringing against stone. The blood of winter kings flows in my veins, and through me in every child I shall bear. I ask no lord to forget his scars. I wear mine as well. But winter has not ended. I would unite us beneath one banner until the storms pass. She laid a hand upon Pettir's arm. You may doubt the man. Judge then the men behind him. Knights of the Vale stood at the gates of the moon when annals first crossed. They have never failed their sworn word. Their swords stand for us now. Northmen muttered into beards. Vale captains kept silent, neat in ranks. And Sansa felt the tapestry of power tighten, every thread she'd woven quivering under tension. That night, torches lit the perimeter of Winterfell's yard. Snow fell thicker, muting the world to white hush. Sansa walked alone from the great keep to the broken tower where Bran had fallen long ago. She found Pettir waiting in the archway, cloak dusted with flakes. He looked almost spectral in half-light, as though half there, half already a haunting memory. Will they bend? She asked without greeting. They will. His lips curved. You spoke like Eddard reborn. She accepted the compliment with a nod. They will want concessions. He chuckled. A lord's greed is a lord's heartbeat. Grant Bear Island its ships. Give White Harbor tax relief. Promise the Umbers pastureland. It is the currency of thrones, my queen. Never fear the cost. Coins can be replaced. Lives cannot. Wow. The word queen fluttered in her chest, like a captive moth. She looked beyond him at the dark tree line. Jon will return. Perhaps. He took her hand. But if he returns bent beneath another queen's edict, the North will splinter. Let us give him a castle whole and a people united behind his sister and her consort. He may join us, or not. But the North will stand either way. She thought of Jon's smile, earnest and unguarded, of the trust in his eyes as he gave her the castle keys. She thought too of the letter he had left, naming her Lady of Winterfell in his absence. A door left open. A chance to seize. Pettir lifted her hand to his lips. The heart tree awaits. Winter cannot bury what we plant there. On the morning of the wedding, the sky bled pale pink at the edges like frost-kissed lavender. Drums beat slow in the yard, their echoes carried beyond the walls, into tents pelted by sleet and watchposts manned by wary archers. A path of pine needles led from the keep to the godswood, bleeding color atop snow like spilled wine. Sansa wore gown of heavy gray velvet, lined with white fox, direwolf embroidery so subtle it seemed alive when the fabric shifted. Her hair, copper flames subdued by snow-glint pearls, cascaded over her shoulders in loose waves. She walked alone but for the direwolf sigil clasp at her throat. She had insisted on it. A Stark walks to her wedding under her own power. The northern lords watched, some wary, some moved. They saw Ned Stark's stride, Catelyn Tully's poise, Robb's quiet confidence. They saw the North itself, battered yet unbroken. At the heart tree, the old gods listened without eyes. Branches clawed a pale sky, red leaves fluttering. Pettir waited beneath, cloak spread across the roots like a dark wing. He had chosen a doublet of charcoal wool, white falcon, and gray direwolf, entwined at his breast. Words were spoken. Not all mouths moved in prayer, but no one spoke dissent. A strand of woolen ribbon bound their wrists, gray for the North, white for the Vale, crimson for the Riverlands, for the blood in Pettir's veins, twisting together until separate colors merged into new hue. Then came the kiss, brief, but sealing. Snowflakes touched their lashes as they parted. In that moment, as their fingers interlaced, Sansa felt the weight of crowns past settle upon her brow. I have done this. She did not tremble. She would tremble later, in private, if ever. From the godswood they emerged to horns and cheers, muted still, wary, but present. Men raised cups. Women curtsied. Littlefinger held her hand high before them. Behold your queen and your king, he proclaimed. Behold the dawn of northern spring. No dawn warmed the sky, but torch flame flared brighter than before. Somewhere, a dire wolf howled, the sound raw and lonely over fields of white. Feasts followed, heavy with hare pie, smoked lake trout, honeyed turnips, and flagons of mulled cider. Sansa tasted little. Flavors turned to ash on her tongue. She noted which lords laughed loudest at Pettir's jests, which slipped into sullen quiet. She watched Vale knights and Northmen swap tales by common hearth, measured how far casks of ale could narrow the gulf of suspicion. She caught Lady Mormont glaring, jaw set like granite, and raised her cup in salute. The girl blinked, then gave the smallest nod. Later, in chambers newly refurbished for the royal couple, Sansa waited by candlelight. Walls still smelled of fresh-cut pine where carpenters had mended broken beams. Moonlight slanted through arrow slits, silvering the bedfurs. She twined a lock of hair around her finger, twisting until it stung. The door opened. Petyr stepped inside, closing it with quiet finality. For a moment neither spoke. The crackle of hearthwood was loud as thunder. He approached, stopping an arm's length away. "You were magnificent today," he said, voice low. Even Lyanna Mormont looked conquered. "I did what was required." Her pulse hammered like a sparrow's. He touched her cheek. "You exceeded it." Their wedding night unfolded like a treaty. Formal, deliberate, every gesture measured. Sansa endured, mind distant, counting heartbeats. She let him see obedient acquiescence, nothing more. When Petyr finally slept, she rose and stood by the window until dawn grayed the world. Somewhere beyond the horizon Jon rode toward Dragonstone, toward dragons, and a war of ice and fire. Here, another war brewed, quieter, but no less deadly. In the weeks that followed, Littlefinger moved through Winterfell, like a conductor summoning crescendos. He held court thrice weekly, listening to pleas of grain shortages, border disputes, and bandits emboldened by the snows. He appointed a master of coin from House Locke, promising meticulous ledgers. He wrote to Lord Hoster Tully's grandchildren, offering trade pacts that might someday knit Riverland's wealth to northern resolve. He flattered Lady Manderley's daughter with whispers of a match to a Vale heir. Where silver would solve, he used silver. Where flattery sufficed, he used words. And in every edict, he co-signed with Sansa, ensuring the North saw a united hand. Sansa walked the battlements at dawn, cloaks snapping in frigid gusts. She spoke with Armorer Micken's successor about forged fires fallen cold for want of charcoal, then directed Vale carts of Donish coal to be diverted from Baelish stores. She attended council meetings, often silent, always listening. She learned which bannerman owed coin to the Iron Bank, which kept secret larders, which nursed silent grudges. Petyr praised her insight. She accepted, smiling. At night, she visited the crypts, speaking to stone effigies. "Father," she whispered, fingertips on the frozen cheek of Lord Eddard's statue. "I do this for the North. Forgive what I must become." No voice answered but the drip of meltwater in the dark. Word of their reign spread south on traitors' tongues. In King's Landing, Queen Cersei read the Raven and laughed, tossing wine across the map table. "Let the Starks crown who they please," she sneered. "Come spring, I'll send them a wedding gift of wildfire." In the Reach, Lady Olenna, aged and wily, quipped that wolves mating with mockingbirds produced curious hatchlings. And in Dragonstone, Daenerys Targaryen listened as Tyrion Lannister explained northern politics, frowning. "If Jon will kneel to me, he must bring his people," she said. "Tell him to summon his queen and her consort south. I would meet this Sansa Stark." But ravens flew slower than rumor. Winter winds battered their wings, and messages arrived late, torn, or never. Until one dawn, a survivor reached Winterfell. Black feathers rimed with ice, scroll warped by frost. Sansa read while Vale scribes warmed ink at her elbow. The message was short, bearing Jon's seal of a sword in a field of snow, but another sigil pressed beside. A three-headed dragon. "I have bent the knee to Queen Daenerys, for the good of all realms," it read. "She comes north to face the Night King. Prepare to receive her. I have told her you will welcome our queen." Sansa's breath crystallized. Vale scribes watched, unsure. She folded the parchment with care. Littlefinger entered the solar, robes trailing. One glimpse at her face, and his eyes narrowed. "Bad news? Our brother," she said tonelessly, has pledged the north to a Targaryen queen. They march for Winterfell. Littlefinger's smile was thin as a paper cut. Then we must decide whether to receive them as friends or as foes. Councils stretched long into torchlit nights. Lords argued until throats cracked, some shouting that the Dragon Queen must be denied entry, others warning that White Walkers would not respect closed gates. Sansa listened, weighing. Petyr paced like a cat, letting their fear build. Finally he spoke, soft yet carrying. "The Dragon Queen comes with fire and foreigners," he said. "Dragons above our roofs, unsullied in our streets. Ask yourselves what she will leave when the dead are vanquished. A dragon does not roost in a cage of polite promises. If we allow her in, we must ensure she leaves." He swept a hand. "We rule the north now. Our crown is new, fragile. Do not trade it for the yoke of southern kings again." Yet some voices, emboldened by Jon's name, cried for unity. Davos Seaworth, ragged and road-weary, arrived with bruised hands and blunt words, urging them to see reason. "Dead don't care about crowns," he said to the hall. "We need every warm body." Sansa faced him. "And when winter is over, who wears the crown then?" "Whoever kept us breathing," the Onion Knight answered. Outside, snow swirled thicker, burying tents, muting horns. Inside, tensions rose like steam over mulled wine. Northern lords who had endured 4 kings in 5 years now feared a 5th. And a foreign queen at that. Vale Knights eyed them warily, hands resting on hilts. In their chamber, Sansa and Petyr spoke in murmurs. "You taught me chaos is a ladder," she said. "But ladders can break. If Jon leads foreigners through our gates, blood will spill." "Then we must control whose blood," Petyr replied. "Offer the queen guest right. Feast her beneath our roof. Show her the North's strength. And if dragons prove unruly, remind their mother that winter storms are colder than dragonfire is hot." He stepped behind her, hands resting on her shoulders. "Trust me. I trust no one," she said, and felt rather than saw his smile. Yet even mistrust must sleep. That night, Sansa dreamt of snow-white thrones and mockingbird songs cut short by the howl of winter wolves. She woke before dawn, heart hammering. At first light, a horn sounded on the eastern watchtower. Long, low, trembling. 3 blasts echoed. Riders approaching. Sansa and Petyr reached the battlements as gray shapes emerged from swirling white. Outriders bearing the Kraken of House Greyjoy, flanking a column of steel-clad unsullied with spears, lifted like a field of dead trees. Behind came wagons heavy with grain and wine. Tribute or bribe, none could tell. And above it all, a shriek split the sky. A black shadow, vast as Winterfell's keep, swept overhead. The dragon's wings stirred snow clouds into spirals that blinded archers and scattered ravens. Men cried out. Horses reared, eyes rolling. Vale Knights clutched spears. Northern bowmen notched arrows but dared not loose. Littlefinger's fingers twitched upon the stone crenel. "So the queen arrives before her herald," he murmured. Sansa watched the dragon bank, molten gold eyes reflecting the walls where her ancestors once walked. She felt fear, yes, but awe too. Ancient, primal awe that pulsed in her blood. Below, the gates creaked open. The Dragon Queen of old stories rode through winter fog, flanked by unsullied captains and a tall, dark-cloaked figure. Jon Tyne. Snow whitened his hair at the temples, fury and relief warring on his face as he gazed upon Winterfell's towers. Sansa drew breath. The game board had shifted, and somewhere in the swirl of snow, she sensed pieces moving beyond sight. White walkers in the haunted forest, southern lords scheming, the Iron Bank tallying debts. But here, atop Winterfell's wall, a queen crowned by necessity and a consort forged in secret stood to greet fire made flesh. "Let us welcome our guests," Petyr said, voice low. Sansa nodded once, cloak swirling. She descended the stairs, each step measured, as drums began to beat a steady cadence that echoed in her chest. Night cloaked Winterfell in brittle cold. Feasts blazed in the great hall. Dragons roosted beyond the walls, their breath searing patches of snow to steaming mud. Jon introduced Daenerys, silver hair gleaming, violet eyes scanning the timber rafters. She wore no crown, only simple black leathers clasped with a three-headed dragon brooch. The hall fell hush. Sansa stepped forward, flanked by Pettyr. She inclined her head. Winterfell welcomes Queen Daenerys, Stormborn of House Targaryen. Daenerys smiled. Oh, and I thank Queen Sansa Stark of Winterfell. She let the title hang, acknowledging and yet weighting it with scrutiny. May we stand together against the Night King. Wine flowed. Meat was carved. Conversation fluttered like startled birds, comparing dragons to dire wolves, Southron harvests to northern fails. Pettyr charmed Missandei with talk of Lysine ports. He toasted Jorah Mormont, praising Old Bear's land blood. He spoke of shared enemies, the Lannisters, the dead, hunger itself. Sansa watched Jon watch her. He smiled when their eyes met, but confusion clouded his gaze. Later, in the Godswood beneath rustling red leaves, they spoke. You married him, Jon said softly, breath white. Pettyr Baelish. Sansa wrapped arms about herself. The North needed allies. We were alone. You were gone. I trusted you, he said. You left me no choice, he countered. You bent the knee without a word. Jon flinched. I bent to save the North, and I married for the same. They stood apart, wind chasing dead leaves. Jon's eyes glimmered like wet obsidian. He's dangerous. I know, she whispered. So I keep him close. Days passed. War councils met in gloomy chambers thick with dragonfire heat, as Daenerys' beasts exhaled beyond the walls. Maps littered tables, pinprick stones marking undead hordes, supply routes, strongholds. Sansa attended each council, voicing logistics. Grain stores, travel time, warm cloaks for unsullied unused to frostbite. Pettyr kept mostly silent, studying. One dusk, a raven arrived from King's Landing. Cersei Lannister offered an armistice, promising her forces to fight the dead if northern rebels recognized her crown once the war ended. Daenerys dismissed it as perfidy, but Littlefinger suggested it could fracture alliances if mishandled. A queen who offers terms appears generous, he warned. Reject them, and any blood spilled by small folk may stain our hands. Jon scoffed. Tyrion leaned forward, intrigued. Varys watched like a sphinx, and Sansa felt Pettyr's words creeping through the room like ivy, subtle yet persistent. That night, Sansa found him atop the battlements, snow dusting his lashes. You sow discord, she accused. I sow caution, he replied. Daenerys would burn King's Landing to root out serpents. I merely point to the snake's nest and suggest gloves. She braced arms on the parapet. You court chaos, but chaos in wartime kills innocence. Pettyr's voice softened. Innocence stays whether we act or not. Better to choose how. A breath steamed between them. Then he reached inside his cloak, withdrawing a folded letter. From the Eyrie, he said. Lord Royce confirms the Vale stands ready to march at my word. 10,000 men, armored, fed, tested on mountain passes. He pressed the parchment into her hand. With dragons above and Vale steel below, the Night King will find no purchase. Sansa traced the errand sigil. And afterward? He smiled. Afterward, we decide what to do with the world we inherit. We, she echoed. The word tasted both promise and peril. The Night King marched. Ravens screamed warnings from last hearth, then fell silent. Snowstorms, unnatural and howling, swept ahead of his legions. Choking torches, freezing streams. Winterfell braced behind walls patched with new timber and old hope. Dragons soared, flames licking clouds. Northmen stood shoulder to shoulder with Unsullied. Vale archers lined the ramparts, arrows black against darkening sky. Pettyr stood upon the inner wall, cloak flaring, calculating distances. How far to the infirmary, to the crypts, to the secret tunnels he alone had mapped at Maester Luwin's old table. Sansa at his side felt the rumble beneath her boots as giants of ice hammered the far gate. She thought of every step that had led to this breath. The mockingbirds whispered words, her own cold resolve. A marriage that tasted of steel. She did not tremble. Horn blasts split the night. Blue-eyed wights flooded trenches of fire, their dead flesh hissing. Dragons shrieked overhead, one ablaze with green wildfire stolen from King's Landing storehouses Pettier had quietly acquired. Jon led a charge of wildlings, Valyrian steel raised. Daenerys circled high, searching the storm for her foe. In chaos, Pettier's hand found Sansa's. "Hold," he whispered. "And the crown is ours forever." She squeezed once, then drew her hand away to lift her father's sword. Ice reforged into twin blades ages ago but now welded back together by Winterfell's smiths. She raised it high, torchlight flickering along the metal. "For the north," she cried, voice ringing across walls and fields and into hearts. Men roared. Arrows loosed. Dragonfire roared. And in that storm of flame and falling snow, Sansa Stark, queen in the north, realized the one truth carved into every story told by Hearthfire. Crowns are fragile threads of promise, yet in hands that will not break they can bind chaos itself. Beyond, the Night King raised his icy spear, and the dead surged anew. To be continued. Snow churned to gray slush beneath 1,000 boots as Winterfell's outer bailey heaved with steel and screams. The first wave of wights had broken like surf upon the ring wall, tumbling into the flaming trench. Yet still they came, silent, relentless, climbing the backs of their fallen. Every heartbeat seemed a hammer on an anvil. Sparks of horror and valor flying between strokes. Arya Stark vaulted from a parapet, rolled through drifting ash, and swept her obsidian spear in a low arc that severed a ghoul's knee. The creature crumpled. She reversed the haft, stabbing down through its skull. White smoke hissed from the wound. She spun again, eyes scanning for the next shadow. All around, Northmen swung axes gone dull. Vale archers knocked what few dragonglass-tipped arrows remained. Somewhere above, wings the size of city gates beat the air. Scattering embers. Drogon's roar mingled with the rattle of chains as ballistae cranked on the ramparts. Inside the main courtyard, Sansa and Littlefinger directed the desperate defense like two halves of an uneasy mind. Pettier paced before the map table, calculating angles for burning oil, dispatching runners to plug breaches. Sansa moved among wounded and weeping alike, cloak stained with soot, issuing calm orders that carried farther than horns. She felt the keep shake every time a white giant slammed its frozen maul against the gate, yet her voice did not tremble. "Shift the wounded to the crypt," she told Maester Wolkan, "but keep 2 crossbowmen at the stair. The dead are not barred by stone." Then, to a grizzled sergeant of House Mormont, "Spare no arrows, Dragon Queen smiths will bring more. Hold until the signal." "What signal, my queen?" the man rasped, blood crusting his beard. Sansa glanced to the skies, where Drogon's black shape wheeled through cloud. "Fire enough to wake the gods." The sergeant nodded, returned to the wall. Sansa exhaled, the breath frosting on her lashes. Pettier stepped close, voice low. "The East Sally Gate weakens. We must retreat behind the inner wall before night falls fully." "It is already night," she answered. "And you promised the gate would hold till dawn." "Promises bend, my love. Steel breaks." He touched her arm. "Withdraw now, and we preserve 10 score lives. Lives I will need when dawn finally comes and crowns us anew." She shook off his hand. "Those 10 score lives are fighting at Yon's side. I will not call them back to save my crown." "Then call them back to save mine," Littlefinger hissed. "Without Winterfell's heart, we rule ashes." Before she could answer, a crash reverberated through the yard. Wood splintering, men shrieking. The East Sally Gate had given way. A tide of whites poured into the narrow lane, pale eyes blazing. Petir's face drained of color. Sansa whirled, cloak flying, and seized a horn from a fallen guard. She climbed broken stairs 2 at a time, emerged atop the inner rampart, and blew 3 long, defiant blasts. Torches dipped in pitch ignited along the balustrade, blue tongues of flame licking sleet. Archers loosed dragon glass, each shaft lighting the darkness for a heartbeat, before vanishing into shadow. Vale pikemen dropped their spears to form a bristling hedge at the breach, while Northmen pulled chains that released iron cages packed with oil-soaked hay. The cages crashed into the lane, shattering, and blinding orange flame rose in a wall. Screams of dead things formed a hideous choir. Behind the firelight, the Night King emerged, ice armor shimmering, spear of crystallized moonlight in hand. He walked through his burning minions untouched, frost radiating from his steps to quench the flames. Blue fire met orange, steam exploded, obscuring everything in a scalding cloud. Jon Snow rallied at the gate, Longclaw blazing with frost-filtered torchlight. "With me!" he shouted, voice cracking with cold. Wildlings and umbers surged around him, alive and furious. He met the Night King's gaze for a heartbeat that seemed a lifetime, then charged. Blades rang like bells. Struck under sea. Jon's first swing clanged against the Night King's spear, sending sparks dancing across ice-slick stones. The Night King countered with inhuman grace. Jon barely slipped aside, feeling air hiss past his cheek. Above, Rhaegal banked, green scales ghostly in moonlight. Daenerys clung to the saddle, hair whipping. She drew breath, shouted, "Drakari!" Green gold flames shot downward, engulfing the Night King. Yet again, ice resisted fire. When the inferno parted, he remained, cloak rimed in frost, spear lifted indifferent to dragonfire. Sansa watched horror bloom across the courtyard. She remembered Bran's tales. Only dragonglass or Valyrian steel could fell that monster, and dragonglass enough had been spent. She scanned the rampart, eyes alighting on Heartsbane, Lord Tarly's ancestral sword, strapped to the back of a passing knight. Valyrian steel. Sansa descended, intercepting the breathless knight. "Give me the blade. My queen." "That is an order." She drew the sword herself, heavier than she'd wielded before. She turned to a nearby stable boy. "Fetch the white mare. Now." Petyr grabbed her elbow. "Sansa." She met his eyes, letting him see resolve that would not bend. "The wolves of Winterfell guard their pack." "Sansa, no." But she was already mounting, boots finding stirrups begrimed with soot. She kicked. Horse surging into the courtyard. Bodies, living dead, parted before her like water. She steered toward the breach. Jon staggered under a blow that splintered shield and clavicle both. He dropped to one knee. The Night King raised his spear to finish him. A scream split the night, not of fear but fury. Sansa spurred the mare. Heartsbane raised in both hands. She swung. The blade met the Night King's spear in a shower of ice shards. Shock ran down her arms like lightning. The mare reared, hooves flashing. Sansa held fast. The Night King turned, expressionless, piercing blue glare falling upon her. Frost coalesced along his gauntlets. He drew the spear back. Arya bolted from broken masonry, face smeared with ash. She leapt. Valyrian dagger reversed in grip. Time stretched. Snowflakes hanging, flames stuttering, and she drove the blade toward his spine. Too late. The Night King spun, deflecting with inhuman reflex. The dagger skittered away. Arya landed, rolled, came up weaponless. Drogon shrieked overhead. A second torrent of flame roared down. The Night King stepped behind an ice giant corpse, heat washing over him but failing to penetrate. Jon thrust upward with Longclaw. The Night King caught the blade between gauntleted palms. Frost creeping. Steel groaned. Sansa saw Heartsbane's edge singing with cold. She shifted her grip, recalled Sir Roderick's lessons. Trust the swing, let body weight carry. She brought the sword sideways, aiming below the spear haft. Steel bit. Ice cracked. The Night King recoiled. Fingers loosening. Jon wrenched Longclaw free, slashed again, this time biting into armor at the collarbone. A fissure of blue light spidered across the Night King's chest. Arya dove, retrieving her dagger. She lunged low, burying it behind skeletal knee. Blue fire raced down his leg, fracturing. Above, Daenerys saw the opening. She whispered to Drogon, voice trembling, "Now." The dragon banked, inhaled. Flame, pure incandescent, fell upon the Night King, who staggered under simultaneous wounds of ice shattering and dragon fire boiling. With an echoing crack, his body split. Blue light flared, dazzling. Then the Night King exploded into shards of crystal and snow. Across the battlefield, whites froze mid-lunge. One by one they collapsed, lifeless. Silence rolled outward in a wave, broken only by distant howl of winter wind, and the stunned breaths of survivors. Jon zagged, blood dripping from torn cloak. Arya straightened, dagger slick with steaming ichor. Sansa slid from the mare, knees buckling. Heartsbane clanged on stone. Men began to cheer, ragged at first, then swelling into thunder. From the ramparts came answering shouts, bows raised, axes thrust skyward. Vale Knights beat shields, Northmen embraced weeping. Somewhere, Brienne knelt beside Podrick's fallen form, tears bright upon her steel. The dead were still dead, but the living had won. Petyr descended the tower stairs, cloak swirling. He crossed the yard as cheers washed over him like rain. He reached Sansa, eyes shining strangely. "My queen," he breathed, voice thick with awe or calculation. She could not tell. "You have done the impossible." She wiped blood from her cheek. "We have all done it." "No." He stepped closer. "You rode alone. You faced death itself." Hand trembling, he brushed a strand of hair from her brow. "The North will sing of this night for generations." Sansa the Winter rose, breaker of the frozen king. Jon approached, leaning on Longclaw away. Behind him, Daenerys dismounted from Drogon, cloak of scorched scales rustling. Their eyes met Sansa's over Petyr's shoulder. In them she saw relief, pride, and a flicker of apprehension. Crowns were fragile. She turned to the Dragon Queen, dipping her head. "Winterfell thanks you, your grace." Daenerys surveyed the courtyard strewn with bodies and melting ice. "It was your courage that broke him," she said. "Ours was merely fire." Petyr touched his heart. "Still, we are in your debt, my queen. And debts must be paid." Jon's jaw tightened. The only payment asked was unity against the dead. "And the dead are no more," Petyr answered softly. "Now we face life, and life is politics." Sansa interposed, voice even. "Tonight, we mourn and tend the wounded. Tomorrow we speak of politics." Daenerys studied her. "Tomorrow, then." She offered a warrior's nod, turned to marshal what remained of her army. Jon lingered, searching Sansa's face. "You risked everything." His voice cracked. "So did you." She touched his cheek, brother to sister. "We each played our part." He glanced at Petyr, suspicion darkening. "Keep your part small," he muttered. Then followed Daenerys. When they were gone, Petyr exhaled. "He means to diminish me." "He fears losing the North," Sansa said. "And he should." Petyr's smile returned, sharp. With the Night King gone, the Dragon Queen will turn her gaze south, to Cersei's throne. Jon will ride with her. That leaves you, here, holding all of the North's hope. He lifted her hand, knuckles scraped raw. "We must secure our reign before foreign dragons and southern lions settle accounts." Sansa withdrew her hand. "We will secure peace first." He inclined his head, conceding the game for now. "As you wish, my queen." They burned the dead for 3 days. Pyres lined the snow-blown plains beyond the walls, towering pillars of smoke signaling victory to a haunted world. Northmen lit one pyre, Valaman the next, Unsullied another. Each flame stitched old wounds with new camaraderie. On the third night, under clear stars, banners still drooping in the chill, council gathered in the great hall. At the high table sat Sansa crowned with slender circlet of winter steel, Littlefinger beside her in sable finery. Jon and Daenerys across the aisle, flanked by Tyrion and Varys. Sir Davos stood near the hearth, the fire lending his shadow the breadth of giants. Arya and Bran watched from the gallery, unseen by most but observing all. Wine circulated, tongues loosened. Eventually, Tyrion rapped a goblet for silence. We stand at an hour unimagined. The long night ended, nations united. Now we must decide what dawn looks like. Daenerys rose. Cersei Lannister sits the Iron Throne through treachery and murder. I will break her tyranny and free the realm. I ask the North to ride with me, as allies, not subjects. Her gaze fixed on Sansa. What? You have proven your valor. Sit beside me in King's Landing. Let the realm see a Stark Queen bolster a Targaryen throne. Nam. Murmurs rippled. Petyr stood smoothly. A generous offer, your grace. Yet the North has bled. Harvests lost. Halls half empty. Our people crave respite, not foreign war. He spread his hands. Grant us 3 years' peace, and afterward, we will gladly review the alliance. Jon bristled. Cersei will not wait 3 years. She builds legions as we speak. Then let her march north, Petyr replied. Winterfell's walls are proven. Mother's mercy knows no southern road. Tyrion frowned. You undermine the very alliance that saved you. A queen's dragons cannot winter in the snow forever. Sansa sipped wine before speaking. Dragons saved all living. The North owes thanks, and freedom to choose its path. Our levees are shattered. If we march now, our fields starve. Yet we cannot ignore southern suffering. She looked to Daenerys. I propose this. Leave one dragon as sentinel over our skies. Proof of your continued protection. Take the rest of your strength south. When our stores recover, we will send men and grain to your war. Daenerys hesitated. A dragon alone is vulnerable. Not if he roosts here, Sansa said. Winterfell is strong, and Northerners loyal to those who guard them. Jon met Daenerys' eyes. It is fair. Tyrion considered, nodding slowly. A compromise worthy of both wolf and dragon. But Petyr's smile tightened. A dragon roosting in Winterfell gave Daenerys claim to northern skies and a watchful eye within his walls. His fingers drummed calculating patterns. He spoke lightly. A sensible starting point. The devil as ever in details. Who commands the dragon in your absence? Who decides when it takes flight? Denderol. Daenerys answered. Only, I command my children. And if you fall? Petyr asked gently. War claims all sovereigns. Tension coiled. Sansa interjected. Then the dragon chooses. They are not ours to master. She felt Bran's gaze on her, and wondered if the boy could see futures turning on that one sentence. At length, Daenerys inclined her head. Very well. Drogon and I fly south. Rhaegal remains. Should I fall, he is free. Agreement murmured. Yet in the shadows, Varys watched Littlefinger with hooded eyes. 2 spiders sensing rival silk. Winter weeks passed. Snow softened, sap rising beneath bark. Daenerys mustered her host. Unsullied regiments marched. Dothraki free riders cantered across slush-dappled moors, dragging lion pennants captured from Lannister scouts. Drogon shadowed them, great wings stirring thaw. Rhaegal nested by Winterfell's hot springs, liking the warmth. His presence drew flocks of sheep, sacrificed to placate appetite. A cost Petyr resented. He murmured to Maester Walken of grain ledgers, of peasants fearing green death overhead, of risk to trade routes. Sansa sensed his grievances growing heavier than ledgers. In council, she found him abrupt with northern lords, dismissive of Davos fleet repairs, irritable whenever Bran's ravens perched too near his study. One night, she confronted him in the solar, overlooking the godswood. You undermine the alliance, she said. I preserve our independence, he replied, closing ledger covers with emphatic clack. A dragon here is a leash on our throat. That dragon saved every soul within these walls. So you remind me. He approached, voice softening. I fear for you, Sansa. Dragon queens bend men's knees, then break their backs. We must strike first, clip wings before talons find our hearts. N. Her eyes narrowed. Strike how? Regal trusts you. He lazes in those springs while frost melts. A goblet of spiced goat laced with poppy seeds would lull him. A team of smiths could fit chains around his neck, dragon glass barbs, once bound. Enough. Sansa stepped back. I will not betray Daenerys' trust. Littlefinger's expression flickered. Hurt or calculation. I would kill a dragon to keep you safe. I must keep the realm safe from men who think as you do. She turned for the door. His fingers wrapped her wrist. Gentle, yet iron. Sansa, I have woven every strand of my life to place you upon a throne. Do not unravel us now. She met his gaze. Icy calm. Your life's threads are snares. I see them clearly at last. Do you? He released her, stepping back. Then see this. Jon returns soon, crowned Lord Protector of Queen Daenerys. When he does, he will renounce your marriage, call it treason wrought by coercion. He has grounds. The North will rally to him, the Vale will retreat, and you will stand alone. I alone stand between you and exile. Nendo. Exile where? Asked a quiet voice from the doorway. Arya entered, eyes like melted silver in torch glow. The crypts, perhaps. Littlefinger masked surprise with a smile. Lady Arya, would you exile me then? If Sansa commands it. Arya fingered the hilt of her cat's paw dagger, the blade that slew the Night King. Sansa's pulse rang. She remembered courtyards in King's Landing, lie spun like silk, the feel of Petyr's lips brushing her brow after he murdered Lysa Arryn. She thought of father and mother lying beneath Winterfell, of Jon's faith in her, of the howl of direwolves in dreams. She spoke. Lord Baelish, I thank you for your service. Your talents are no longer required in Winterfell. Silence, heavy as snowdrifts. Littlefinger's smile froze. You jest. Leave by dawn. Sansa's words clear. Ride to the Twins or the Fingers or wherever mockingbirds perch. But do not return. He laughed brittle. You dismiss me like a stable hand. I hold the Vale's loyalty. Arya interrupted. Robin Arryn signed a new writ this morning. She tossed a scroll. It landed at Petyr's feet. Lord Royce commands the Knights of the Vale. Pledged to the Queen of Winterfell. Littlefinger bent, trembling. The seal was intact. Royce's falcon rising. His mouth worked soundlessly. You taught me that power resides where men believe it. Sansa said, I believe it resides in truth. And the truth is that you created chaos for sport, sold my sister to a sadist, murdered my aunt, and turned every pledge into poison. Petyr drew breath, eyes shining. Everything I did for you. No, she said. You did it for a boy's fantasy of a girl who never existed. Arya stepped forward. This girl exists. And she passes sentence. Littlefinger fell to his knees. Mercy. Not today. Sansa turned away. The dagger whispered free. One motion. Swift as winter wind. Petyr Baelish collapsed, eyes wide, blood draining into rushes. Arya wiped the blade, expressionless. Sansa did not weep. She felt relief cold and clean as spring melt. Jon returned at moonrise 2 nights later, cloaked in southern dust and northern hope. He rode through open gates, no longer barred by fear, and dismounted before Sansa on the steps of the great keep. She greeted him with an embrace smelling of ash and pine. I heard, he murmured against her hair. I did what was necessary, she answered. I know. He pulled back, studying her circlet. Are you safe? I am queen, she replied. Safety is an illusion. He smiled, weary. Then let us be illusions together. He extended a sealed parchment. Daenerys' decree recognizing Sansa as queen in the north. Independent. Allied. Sansa broke the seal, heart hammering. The words were simple, binding. She clutched the parchment, feeling freedom pulse through ink. Jon's expression softened. She says dragons do not belong in cages. Rhaegal is yours, to guard the north forever, if he chooses. Sansa glanced skyward. The green dragon circled lazily, outlined by aurora shimmering across polar sky. He will choose. Snowflakes drifted between them, gentle, almost warm. Fires burned in braziers, no longer signals of desperation but beacons of new dawn. Arya joined them, Bran beside in his wheeled chair, eyes farseers distant. Davos, Brienne, Gendry. Tyrion climbed the steps. Torches cast long shadows, one shadow missing now, dissolved into blood and snow. Sansa raised the parchment to the gathering. Tonight, we begin again. The north shall be free, the realm shall be whole, and the wounds of winter will heal. Cheers echoed, not as tumult, but as harmony. Bells in the broken tower chimed, a sound unheard since childhood. In the godswood, the heart tree's red leaves rustled. A breeze carried scent of pine and distant sea, promise of summers yet to bloom. Sansa Stark closed her eyes, feeling the world turn. She had walked through dungeon and dream to reach this moment. Now she stood, neither pawn nor prize but queen, tempered by fire, sharpened by frost, and crowned by the will of a people who saw themselves in her unbowed eyes. Far above, Rhaegal roared, a thunder rolling across starlight. And beneath that roar, the north answered, one voice, vast and rising. The end. For now. Ah. Hey. Oh. The spring that followed the Night King's defeat was neither gentle nor swift. Snowmelt flooded gullies, churned roads to viscous clay, and revealed under every drift the corpses of soldiers and wights alike. Stiff limbs jutting from thawing earth like broken branches. In Winterfell's bailey, the stench demanded swift burial fires. Sansa decreed that the fallen of every house be burned together in great barrows outside the walls. Ashes mingled so no banner could boast exclusive sacrifice. Pyres smoldered day and night, clouds of gray drifting east on fitful winds, the air tinged with pine resin and char. It was a season of smoke and sap, of grief and reluctant hope. Rhaegal lingered in the hot spring ravine behind the godswood, preferring the rising steam to the chill that still clung to mornings. His emerald scales dulled beneath a crust of soot, until stable boys were sent to scrub him with long-handled brushes, capped in boar hair. He tolerated the attention with lazy flicks of his spine tail, issuing cavernous purrs when bristles reached the sensitive ridges behind his jaw. Some children dared creep to the brink of the ravine and toss knuckle bones or polished stones into his talons. He sniffed each offering, pupils widening to golden rings before the trinket vanished behind dagger teeth. Thus the dragon became a legend made flesh, equal parts guardian and lurking terror, a god disguised as beast. Within the walls, carpenters replaced shattered gates, masons reset keystones, seamstresses sewed fur-lined surcoats for soldiers who would march south when summer finally conquered the storm. Sansa rose before dawn each day to pace the ramparts, cataloging every creak of timber, every missing torch bracket, every sagging length of parapet rope, and noting them for the day's work ledger. She kept quill and ink tucked inside her fox fur muff, and scribbled as she walked, a habit that amused Sir Davos when he met her at sunrise to discuss harbor repairs at White Harbor, or shipping lanes to the Vale. Arya vanished for weeks at a time, slipping beyond the last river with scouting parties who hunted remnants of the Night King's horde, wights that had collapsed inert yet still reanimated when touched by moonlight. She and her rangers of the Weir, as small folk named them, tracked the restless dead through thickets of wind-blown spruce, severing heads where they found them, burning the pieces in hastily dug pits. She returned leaner, eyes flintier, smile rarer. Only in the godswood with Bran did she seem at ease, leaning against the weirwood roots while her brother's distant gaze gathered secrets on raven's wings. Bran himself spent long hours in the abandoned rookery. Crows alighted on the parapet to stir at his silent command, flapping south or east with messages none could read. When asked what he saw, he answered with riddles. Stones drowning beneath shifting sand, a lioness clutching an iron crown, a bouquet of blue roses laid upon a wall of skulls. Prophecy and memory intertwined like vines, strangling the same tree. Sansa listened politely, thanked him. then focused on the repair of granaries and the allocation of seed wheat. Jon Snow remained only 3 days before duty called him south once more. He left with a retinue of wildlings under Tormund, 50 Northerners led by Jane Poole, now Captain Poole, and a handful of Vale Knights permitted by Yazan Royce. Ghost trotted beside him through the gate, white coat dappled by thawing sleet, amber eyes fixed on Sansa until distance swallowed the direwolf. Before departure, Jon clasped his sister's forearm atop the battlements. "You will have drought after flood," he warned. "Nature reclaims what war forsakes. Plant barley on the high fields, oats in the low peas in every garden. And trust no envoy bearing Cersei's seal." She kissed his cheek. "And you, brother, trust no rumors of northern rebellion. We are stronger knit than ever." He smiled, but she saw the worry under the half-moon curve of his lips. It was the worry of a man who knew the realm's hearts could not heal as quickly as their soils warmed. He spurred his horse, and the column wound through muddy ruts toward Moat Cailin. Banners tattered but hopeful. By the time the first buds of mountain ash unfurled crimson fringes in the courtyard, rumors seeped up the King's Road. Daenerys had taken Harrenhal without siege. Its Lannister garrison had opened the gates at the sight of Drogon's smoking silhouette. Lord Edmure Tully, freed from Casterly Rock's dungeons, proclaimed for the Dragon Queen, raising Riverlord levies to her banner. The Golden Company, hired by Cersei, had sailed into the Blackwater but found the chain newly restored across the mouth. A night attack by Greyjoy longships, loyal to Yara. These tidings arrived on raven scrolls, sealed with Tyrion's sigil and countersigned by Jon, bearing also separate notes in Jon's tight hand. "We press hard. Pray harvests allow you to send men in autumn. The Queen honors her word." Each letter concluded, "Keep the North safe. The realm may depend on it yet." Sansa read every line twice, sealed them in a chest, and showed only the summary to the Provisional Council. Brienne of Tarth, Davos, Wyman Manderley, Lady Barbary Dustin, and Lyanna Mormont, now grown into a voice that carried like a war horn. They debated troop allocations, grain tithes, Rhaegal's appetite, and the small matter of resettling refugees from the flatlands where winter still gnawed. Lady Dustin argued for swift deployment south to finish the war while northern valor was renowned. Brienne advised caution until wounds closed. Lyanna wanted to ride herself, sword in hand. Davos reminded that dead fields would not feed marching feet. Sansa listened, weighed, and decided. 2,000 light horse from houses of the Rills and Hornwood would ride by midsummer, with wagons of dried venison and lie-nursed potatoes enough for a month. More would follow after planting. At dusk, as the council dispersed, Sansa lingered by the open window of the solar overlooking the Godswood. The sky glowed coral and gold above black pines. She could feel the weight of northern hopes pressing against her shoulders, hopes in a crown of winter steel that seemed heavier each dawn. She closed her eyes, remembering a darker crown once crushed in Joffrey's cruel hand, and whispered gratitude to the quiet. Outside the walls, Petyr Baelish's body lay beneath an unmarked cairn. Arya had deposited his signet ring at Sansa's feet after the execution. Sansa kept it locked in a box of alderwood, a reminder that webs can be cut. Yet she felt echoes of his schemes even now, ghost threads tugging at corners of her choices. "Trust no envoy," Jon had said. "Trust no whisper," she amended. "But trust must find root somewhere, or kingdoms crumble into suspicion." That summer, trust sprouted in unexpected soil. When Rhaegal lost a scale to rot, fungus creeping between plates, Maester Wolkan confessed ignorance of dragon physiology. Sansa wrote to Oldtown, summarizing the ailment. The reply arrived from Archmaester Marwyn himself. A dusty folio containing Qyburne's banned treatises on dragon biology, long thought burned at Cersei's order, but secretly preserved. Marwyn suggested salves brewed from pine tar, ground obsidian, and goat bile, to be applied thrice daily. Wolkan blanched. Sansa rode to the ravine and oversaw the treatment herself. Bare-handed, pressing foul ointment along the raw flesh under the scale, while the dragon's rumble shook her bones. Rhaegal's eye, great as a shield, focused on her. She spoke softly of wind over Carhold's cliffs, of snowmelt racing through gullies, of free skies. By moonrise, the fungus receded. He closed the membrane over his eye and drifted to drowsy contentment. From that night onward, he answered when she called, lowering his serpentine neck, so she might scratch the ridge behind his brow. Word soon spread. The Queen of Winterfell communed with dragons. Small folk left tokens, woven pine garlands, carved direwolf fetishes, even jars of early honey, at the ravine gate. Sansa accepted them all, sending bakers to distribute honeyed bread among orphan lines. Bards roaming from White Harbor to Bear Island changed their tunes. They sang of Sansa Dragonfriend, of green fire dancing with northern snow. Banners began incorporating a stylized dragon curled protectively around a direwolf, though heralds debated proper tincture. Not all found comfort in this alliance. Rhaegal's hunting ranged wider with returning warmth. Shepherds reported missing ewes, and twice a half-eaten elk carcass landed within bowshot of Deepwood Motte. Lady Dustin petitioned that the beast be yoked or caged. Wyman Manderley jested they might serve dragon-roasted mutton at the next feast, drawing laughter. But mutters stirred. Sansa convened lords beneath the broken weirwood arches of the audience yard. Rhaegal perched on the far wall as silent witness, wings tenting like green sails. His presence sharpened dialogue more than any blade. "My lords," Sansa addressed, voice echoed by chilly stones. "You fear what you do not command. Do you command winter? Do you command the sea? Yet you survive both through respect, not chains. Rhaegal is no cur to be leashed. He is a promise kept, that the Dragon Queen's word is bond, and the North's safety matters to all realms." She gestured to the dragon. "He eats because he lives. So do we. I set aside 20 silver stags compensation for each livestock lost. Bring your tallies to the steward. In return, you will leave Rhaegal unharmed. Harm him, and you construct a pyre for every town between here and the neck." "Then so." Silence followed, broken only by Lyanna Mormont's approving grunt. The terms were accepted. As roads dried, merchants from the free cities ventured past White Harbor, bearing saffron bronze mirrors. Dried persimmons and Dornish wine gone scarce since the sand snakes turned their gaze inland. They spoke of upheaval across the narrow sea. Volantis threatened Tyrosh. The Iron Bank quit Bravos for sunnier loans, and a red priest in Norvos preached the coming of a northern queen who would light a second dawn. Sansa laughed when Davos relayed the tale, but the Onion Knight shrugged. "Men follow stories," he said. "A wise queen keeps one eye on myth and another on grain. Grain.u." It became obsession. The first barley harvest failed under unexpected frost. Sansa ordered the castle stores open to the poorest crofters, a decision that staved off hunger but emptied cellars. She sent ravens south requesting surplus from fertile crown lands. Messages returned lamenting pillaged fields. She penned a desperate letter to Jon. "We can send men, but they may starve before they see the neck." Weeks passed before answer came by breathless rider. Queen Daenerys' army had broken Cersei's host at Bitterbridge, but wildfire released by fleeing alchemists had scorched half the Mander Valley. Grain was ash. Sansa convened the council at midnight. Candles sputtered in drafts. Parchment maps of the north lay spattered with ink and red wax. Davos proposed sailing to Bravos for grain loans. Wyman Manderley offered to underwrite ships, but mooted the risk of pirates. Brienne suggested rationing garrisons. Lyanna Mormont slapped the table. "We ride west and barter steel for wheat from the Ironborn's captured mainland farms." The room erupted in argument. Outside, a thunder of wings shook shutters. Rhaegal descended to the yard, stirring a swirl of dust. Sansa felt an idea flame behind her eyes. Wild, audacious, but perhaps the only way. She raised her voice. "We fly." Silence. She outlined her plan. She would mount Rhaegal and journey to Old Town and the Reach's unscorched valleys, negotiating directly with House Redwine and Lady Olenna's heirs, whose vineyards escaped wildfire. A queen on Dragonback might secure grain where ravens failed. Davos' brows knitted. Brienne stiffened. Lyanna grinned like a wolf pup. Manderley chewed lip, calculating. Barbary Dustin whispered about dragons over Dustinbury. But none could offer alternative. Preparations consumed a fortnight. Taylor stitched a padded saddlecloth for Melchide, reinforced with strips of boiled leather. Maester Walken brewed elixirs against air sickness, and wrote meticulous instructions for dragon wounds. Arya returned, hearing the news, and volunteered to accompany. Sansa refused. "The North needs your steel more than I need your shadow." Bran simply nodded. "When you look down on the arbor you will remember winter," he said cryptically. She kissed his brow. On the dawn of departure, Winterfell assembled in the yard. Frost sparkled on tower ribs, but eastern sky burned pink. Rhaegal crouched, wings half unfurled, reins of silver-inlaid chain draped across his neck. Sansa wore supple riding leathers of gray, trimmed with white direwolf fur. She ascended a stone stair to the low wall. Heartbeat drumming against ribs. The dragon lowered his head. She stepped onto the curve of his horn, swung into the makeshift seat, and secured herself with a broad belt. The air smelled of furnace heat and pine smoke. She looked down. Davos saluted, hand to heart. Brienne's blue gaze shone with rare admiration. Lyanna punched the air. Bran watched through raven eyes. Sansa raised her hand in blessing, then leaned close to the warm scales. "Fly," she whispered. Rhaegal launched. The rush of ascent stole her breath. Winterfell dwindled. A patchwork of slate, snow, and smoke within moments. Wind tore tears from her eyes, whipped copper hair loose. She clung to the reins, but found the movement strangely natural, as though some ancient marrow memory guided the balance of her hips and the tilt of her shoulders. The dragon banked south, sun gilding his wings. She glimpsed the heart tree's red leaves fluttering like farewell ribbons. They crossed the neck by noon, clouds of starlings scattering at their passage. Below, causeways glistened, dotted with spears of watchful crannogmen. By dusk, the flint cliffs gave way to rolling green where snow had already surrendered. She saw fields of winter rise swaying, untouched by war. Camps of small folk waved. Shepherds bowed. A dragon's shadow may terrify, but word of a stark queen riding its back traveled quick, and torches spelled directions in open fields. They rested on a bare hill near Fairmarket the first night. Rhaegal curled around her like a living wall, exhaling heat to stave off chill. She unrolled maps by firelight, marking tributaries iced too thick for ferries. Sleep came fitful. Dreams of crimson castles and ghostly mockingbirds dissolved into dawn. 10 days' flight brought them to Old Town Sprawl, its high tower gleaming ivory beyond the Honeywine. Ships crowded the harbor. Tyroshi cogs, Pentoshi whalers, a chipped galley flying the kraken of pike. At Rhaegal's approach the harbor guns trained upward but did not fire. The high tower's great horn sounded one mournful note, a greeting or warning. She could not tell. She landed in a marsh meadow outside the walls. Steward escorts arrived, white cloaks billowing. Archmaester Marwyn himself greeted her, green glass candle clutched like a talisman. In the citadel's candlelit vaults, she bargained with grain factors and merchant princes. She offered ironwood lumber, furs, northern sapphires, and when that impressed little safe passage of their ships, under Rhaegal's watch from Mander's Mouth to White Harbor. Contracts were inked on vellum scented of cedar. By the 5th day, holds of red wine leviathans brimmed with barley, rye, and beans. Old Town smiths agreed to forge plows in exchange for obsidian shipments, for the citadel now craved study of such glass. She sent ravens ahead to White Harbor, instructing Manderley's fleet to meet the convoy along the Bight. Then she turned Rhaegal northward once more, heart light despite the ordeal. Over the Shield Islands she spied war fleets, iron-borne longships chasing Lannister remnants fleeing west. She steered clear. Grain mattered more than vengeance. Yet just beyond Cape Wrath, storm clouds massed, swollen purple. Lightning forked the sea. Wind howled. Rhaegal battled currents that buffeted like giant hands. Rain slashed, turning scales slick. Sansa tightened straps until fingers numbed. A gust hurled them sideways. The dragon shrieked, wings fighting for purchase. Downdrafts sucked them towards spindrift, colliding with black cliffs. She urged upward. Fly, brave one. He beat wings, but another gust, whip cracking, forced a spiral. A spire of basalt jutted through mist. She glimpsed it a heartbeat too late. The wing's trailing edge tore against rock with a sickening rend. Rhaegal roared. They tumbled. Sansa's world spun into slate sky and white foam. She clung to the saddle hilt as sea rushed up. Black glass strewn with froth. At the last instant, Rhaegal flared his good wing. Arrested plunge just enough to crash into a shelf of shingle instead of open water. Spray exploded. Stones skittered. Pain reverberated through the beast, shuddering into her bones. She felt him convulse. Sensed heated blood seep where membrane hung in tatters. Thunder boomed. Rain hammered her helm. They lay at the base of cliffs, somewhere north of the arbor. Jagged ridges loomed, too steep to climb. Rhaegal attempted to stand. His left wing refused, dripping ichor. Panic threatened to overtake her. But she drew breath, summoned northern steel. First she checked his limb. Membrane shredded like torn sail. Bone visible yet unbroken. She recalled Marwyn's texts. Dragon wings healed if membrane was kept clean and bones splinted. She needed shelter, fire, needle-like staples of bronze. She unloaded supply packs, dried jerky, flasks of cheap wine, a coil of rope, small cask of pitch. She sliced jerky into strips, mixed with wine, and coaxed Rhaegal to swallow for strength. He lapped the wine, eyes glazed with pain yet trusting. Climbing the cliff seemed impossible, but she found a sea cave mouth just beyond the crash site. With coaxing and torchlight, she urged Rhaegal inside. The cave widened into vaulted chamber where tide sloshed in subdued roars. She gathered driftwood, used flint to spark fire, warmed pitch until pliable. She tore strips from her saddle blanket, dipped them, and with slow, soot-smudged precision, sutured membrane edges where they curled. She bound splints of driftwood along the trailing bone. Rhaegal endured, panting, pupil slits wide. When she finished, she collapsed against his foreleg, exhaustion plucking her eyelids. Rain hammered cave mouth, applause for survival. 3 days the storm raged. She rationed jerky, used helm to boil seawater down to brine. Licking the salt crust it left, Rhaegal dozed and healed. When sky cleared, gulls wheeled outside. She ventured onto the shingle to build a signal pyre. Smoke rose in oily column. On the sixth dawn, a sail cut horizon. Green kraken of pike. Ironborn shell. She considered hiding, but smoke betrayed her. The longship anchored shallows. 20 reavers splashed ashore, axes gleaming. Their captain, a rangy man with braided beard, hailed her with mocking bow. Lady of flame beasts, our king would pay gold for that lizard's skull. She planted feet, drew the dragonglass-tipped spear she'd carried for show in Old Town. Turn back or burn. Laughter carried on wind. They advanced. Rhaegal stirred behind her, nostrils flaring. She tensed. His wing might fail in violence. As reavers closed, she thrust spear tip into sand, lifted both palms. One chance, she said. They jeered. She looked to the sky, whispered old First Men prayer, then spoke Valyrian once used to soothe Rhaegal's wound. Dracarys. The dragon's chest expanded. Fire belched, emerald tinged with gold. The blaze swept the beach, igniting kelp and wrack, and men alike. Screams drowned surf. Those who dove into water sizzled as oil-slick flames chased them across the surface. The longship's mast burst into torch. Within minutes, nothing remained but blackened timbers and charred shapes. Sansa knelt in sand, tremors racking limbs. Rhaegal lowered his head, nuzzling her shoulder. She pressed a hand to warm scales, tears unshed caught in lashes. "Thank you," she whispered. They waited until noontide. Smoke drew a different sail at dusk. White Harbor Griffin Pennant. Sir Marlon Locke's cog eased close. Skiff ferried him ashore, astonishment wide across his wind-burned face at finding his queen among scorched ruin. Grain ships anchored beyond. Safe. Tears came then, tears of relief for harvest secured and blood avoided. A week later she flew again, wings still stiff, but steady, Regal guided by gentle breezes. The fleet followed north. When Winterfell's towers broke horizon, she felt a knot loosen in soul. Crowds thronged fields despite evening chill, cheering as the dragon descended into courtyard torchlit and garlanded with spring blossoms. Davos caught her as she dismounted, eyes shining. "The grain ships entered harbor yesterday," he said. "You saved us from hunger." Lyanna punched her arm. Bran smiled faintly. Raven perched on shoulder. Brienne bowed, unsmiling but proud. That night a feast filled the hall with scents of fresh bread for the first time in moons. Musicians played northern reels, mixed with a Taroshi lute air in honor of traded goods. Sansa sat at high table, cup of mulled apple wine warming chilled fingers. She watched children chase each other between trestles, dogs underfoot, the clamor of living hearts unafraid. Rhaegal's shadow flickered beyond narrow windows as he circled above, torchlight glinting off his healed wing. When the music paused, Wyman Manderly rose, cheeks flushed. "My queen," he boomed, "you flew farther than any Stark since Brandon the shipwright, and returned with life for every hearth." He lifted a carved wooden bowl overflowing with barley. "The North toasts you." Chairs scraped. Men and women stood, cups raised, voices melding into roar that rattled rafters. Sansa felt cheeks heat, not with embarrassment but fierce joy. She stood, motioned for silence and spoke. "We survived winter because we remembered what it means to be one people. We will face every season the same. Grain from the Reach, ships from White Harbor, axes from Bear Island, wisdom from the Citadel. Together they wave a net that no storm can tear." She lifted her cup. "To tomorrow, bright as a dragon's flame, enduring as the heart tree's roots." They drank. Music resumed. She sank onto bench, heart full enough to spring. Later, in the quiet of her chamber, she removed the winter steel circlet, placed it on the table, and wrote to Jon. "The North stands fed and strong. Rhaegal heals. The Ironborn tested our resolve and tasted flame. Finish your war, brother. The North will be ready when peace needs keeping." She sealed the letter with direwolf wax, pressed her signet. Dragon wolf entwined. Outside, night wind carried faint wing beats to her balcony. She stepped into cold, looked up as Rhaegal drifted past Moon, a living emerald silhouette. He roared, low and content. She closed her eyes and envisioned futures spinning beyond horizon. A realm rebuilt from ashes, daughters learning dragon lore beside smithy fires, markets where Dornish peppers sold beside pickled herring, lords swearing oaths to queens who kept promises. It could be. She would make it so. A knock sounded. She turned. Arya entered, travel-stained cloak shedding road dust. Her gray eyes glinted. "South sends whispers," she said. "Cersei has unleashed something dark in the Red Keep. Alchemy and shadows. Jon may need northern steel sooner than autumn." Sansa breathed out, tasting the edge of war returning like iron on tongue. She nodded. "Then the North will ride." Arya's lips curved. "With dragon wings shadowing us?" "With dragon wings and direwolf hearts." They clasped wrists. Outside, dawn's first pale stripe edged the east, promising a day uncharted. The muster began at first thaw. Horns sounded from White Knife to Skagos, calling bannermen to Winterfell. Blacksmiths hammered breastplates, sized for men grown lean on winter roots. Archers fletched new arrows tipped with castle-forged steel, for enemy this time would bleed, not shatter in ice. Rhaegal soared above columns of recruits, his healed wing leaving eddies of warm air that melted frost on helmets below. Children chased his shadow, believing themselves invisible to harm beneath it. Sansa oversaw every detail. Grain packed in waxed linen, salted cod layered with spruce needles, leather tents infused with pine tar for waterproofing. She appointed Brienne commander of the vanguard, Davos master of ships and supply, Lyanna Mormont captain of scouts despite her youth, because courage obeys no almanac. Barbary Dustin was offered stewardship of Winterfell during absences. She accepted. Surprised, oath sworn over the heart tree. The night before departure, Sansa returned to the Godswood alone. Snowdrops pushed through thawing moss, white petals trembling in breeze. She knelt at the weirwood, pressed palm to bark scarred by centuries. "Father." "I leave again chasing war, though my heart longs for quiet. Guide my steps that they not wander into cruelty." She felt, or imagined, a warmth pulse beneath skin. Like the tree breathed answer. Dawn brought clear skies. Rhaegal waited in the outer yard, harness gleaming. Sansa mounted, helm glinting. Army assembled beyond, banners rippling. Direwolf entwined with dragon, merman of White Harbor, bear of Mormont, silver fist of Glover, and a new standard. White field bearing a single red heart tree leaf, symbol of new unity. She raised her voice, ringing above creak of leather and snort of horses. "Northmen, Vale Knights, free folk and islanders, we ride not for plunder, nor for glory, but to end the last shadow upon our realm. Cersei sowed wildfire among innocents. We will root it out. Step forward with courage, for you carry every hearth behind you." She drew Heartsbane from scabbard, returned to her by Brienne after that first frigid battle, and pointed it south. For the living, they thundered. Rhaegal's wings beat once, twice, lifting them above the spears. Sansa gazed down, a river of men and women flowing beyond Winterfell's walls. She felt fear, but deeper, purpose, a tether stronger than any chain. Bran watched from tower balcony, ravens swirling. His voice drifted on wind only she could hear. "Threads converge, sister. Be wary of green flame and golden eyes." She touched two fingers to temple, acknowledgement carried on silent vow. South they flew, over white knife gleaming like spilled silver, over barrowlands where hill barrows glowed in sunrise, over neck reeds where children waved spears carved from alder. Below, the army marched, boots echoing songs of old victory. When they reached Moat Cailin by dusk, Sansa saw a banner waiting, a half lion, half stag in crimson and gold, Baratheon of King's Landing. Beneath it, a rider lifted horn. She ordered descent, landing on old greenstone walls. The rider removed helm, Gendry waters, eyes bright. "Storm's End stands with Winterfell," he announced, offering sealed letter. "The Queen commands, but the people chose myself." He smiled shy. "I choose Arya." Sansa laughed despite weight of war. Then the realm calves new lines. She broke seal, Daenerys' script, requesting immediate meeting at King's Landing's northern gate when they drew near. She also read a second note, penned by Jon. "Tyrion suspects wildfire laid beneath streets. We seek tunnels. Trust only him, Davos, or myself. The Queen's temper tests edges. Hurry." Night deepened. Sansa stood atop Moat Cailin's crumbling tower, watching aurora flicker across sky like curtains of emerald flame. She felt the thrum of dragon muscles beneath her boots, smelled salt on southern breeze, heard distant drums of marching feet. War awaited, but so did ending. She closed eyes, breathed. When she opened them, dawn had begun its timid approach, painting horizon pale gold. The North's army stretched below, restive, expectant. She mounted again. "Fly," she said, voice steady. Rhaegal launched. Behind them, the army surged forward. Banners snapped, hearts beat, and so they rode, dragon wing and direwolf heart, toward a city of green fire and iron thrones, carrying with them grain of hope harvested in winter's darkest hour, ready to sow a final season of peace, or bleed in the plant.